Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Scott Schilling Speaks. I'm excited about this episode because this is a new friend that, my goodness, so much great wealth of wisdom and so much. Was the founding chairman, CEO, and president of stamps.com and so much more. I'm going to stop there because we're going to go discuss it. Mohan Ananda, thanks for joining us here on Scott Schilling Speaks.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much.
So that had to be a pretty amazing experience to be the founding chairman, CEO, and president of stamps.com. How did that come about?
Okay, let me give you a little background before that.
Sure.
As you know, I'm an immigrant. I came from India, and I came as a student to Pasadena, California Institute of Technology. Is one of the, in my opinion, probably the best school in the world. So I happened to come there, and then I stayed on in California the rest of years. So I came in 1967, so it's going to be almost 55 years. So it's a
Wow.
long journey. Uh, then I did my master's, I did my PhD. Then I joined NASA at JPL. Then I worked for the US Air Force think tank and became an architect for GPS. So
Wow.
then during that process, I used to travel a lot to Europe, part of the NATO interface. And then because of the travel, I decided to go to law school because I didn't want to continue that kind. So I became a lawyer, and I've been practicing law for 35 years. I mean, that's my background, a very brief background. Because of my working with the DoD on the GPS and other classified programs, my knowledge of technology gave me the opportunity to create new technology and get certain patents for it. That's how the story came. And then once you have the technology in place, you are looking for applications. And
Right.
one of the applications happened to be the stamps.com using printing stamps, meaning like printing money by everybody, but it has to be secure. So
Right.
that's the technology with which we started the stamps.com. Of course, stamps.com it can only come into being with the approval of the United States Postal Service because they are the gatekeeper. So either they approve or they don't approve. But they did approve, and we started in 1996. And we finally, in 2021, 25 years later, we sold the company, the whole company, to a private equity, Thoma Bravo, very large private equity firm, for $6.7 billion. So that was, in my opinion, a very successful journey. And I can get into anything more depending upon your question.
Well, I got to believe that everybody would love to understand. Wait a second. I need a little more detail here. How do you go from startup to exit, even though it might have been 25 years? That's admirable. But $6.7 billion startup to 6.7 billion. That had to be fraught with a lot of excitement and probably a few challenges along the way.
Lot of challenges. In fact, there are more challenges than excitement, to be very candidly. Initially, of course, to get approval from the government or USPS, that is an incredible challenge because when we tried to raise capital, we went and talked to a number of venture investors, but they liked my concept or the technology, but they know that this is USPS. If it doesn't approve, it has no value. It's a
Right.
binary. Either you have it or you don't have it. So they were reluctant. And then they also even told me like this: if you are developing a drug and go to a FDA, even, your drug may not come, but FDA has done many drugs. So we'll take that chance. But USPS, they have not approved anything. There is no history of, Pitney Bowes got this Pitney Bowes franking machine about 100 years back. So we don't have that history. So no, we will look at you if and when, if they approve. So we
What
were not, we didn't get any funding in the initial, raising capital. So I had to put myself, take the risk, and I had to put certain amount of money to see whether I can take it to the next level. But I did get, did raise subsequently, but it's a really, really interesting story from that point of view. And it is in my book, which I wrote, the, autobiography of an immigrant. That book has a pretty detailed story about it. And, it will take a long time to go through what all happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to certainly get into the book because this is what's fascinating. And part of the reason for doing this in the first place is to let everybody know of this book because there's some amazing stories, but just the highlight of that story of going and breaking a barrier of nobody has ever successfully sold to that entity to begin with. And so the choice, like you say, becomes very binary. Either you take the risk or you don't. And then it becomes binary again. It's somebody else's money or yours. And so there's this continue of having to go out if you believe strong enough, and I have to believe that you believed strong enough, or you would have never done that.
Exactly. But the real thing is, I knew, because I've been in the technology for a long time, especially in the area of internet, digital technology. When we started in 1996, so actually when I applied for my patent, it was 1992. It took 4 years to get the patent. In 1992, internet is embryonic. It's a very, very, I don't know whether people know, there used to be called DARPA, which is the defense, network. That was really controlling or providing access to internet. And by 1996, it became little bit, but still, it's almost like 1 bit by bit. So any application of internet in a real e-commerce is unheard of. That's, I kind of had this vision, in my opinion, this is going to grow. The internet will be everywhere. I kind of had this image in my head that prompted me. In fact, if you look at that, I had 4 patents in the e-commerce area. I would say that probably are the first 4 patents in the history of e-commerce. Every other patent people have come refers to that, meaning it is something kind of a very early time, that because the internet was not there. So everybody now uses the technology which the real concept is any communication between 2 individuals or 2 systems has to be encrypted. It cannot be an open communication. And you have to not only encrypt it, you have to be able to decrypt it in reasonable time to become useful. So that concept came into being, and that was the result of the patent. And that is why you can print money. Anybody can print without, without somebody supervising it. So when you print stamps.
That's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And so now you also act as the chairman and CEO of a new SPAC entity, Innovative International Acquisition Corporation. Tell us a little bit of what that's all about.
Okay, that's a very recent in the sense, actually in the month of October of 2021, 3 major events took place in my life. One, I've completed and published the book. 2, I sold this stamps.com to Thoma Bravo for 6.7 billion. Third is the IPO. I took this SPAC, which is the International Innovative International Acquisition Corp, to NASDAQ and raised $230 million. So everything happened in October 2021. I just
Pretty
want
good month.
it's in that month, all the three. So it's a very important month in my kind of development. Let me kind of step back a little bit and talk about what is a SPAC. The
Yes.
Special Purpose Acquisition Company is a blank check company. Generally, when people take company public meaning in the stock market, I have done 3 times. I've done Stamps. I've done another company, Investnet. It's it's in the New York Stock Exchange, and another company in London Stock Exchange. It's a venture, a JAP venture fund. So I know how it takes, how you bring a company to public, and it is a well understood process, but it takes a lot of time, and people look at primarily your performance, your how much revenue you make, what's your expenses, what your net, and all the numbers of the company, and what are the product service you do. So that's how you go public. Most companies go public in a conventional IPO, whereas SPAC, there is no company, nothing. It's really a blank check. But the investors look at the people like me or my team. They look at the team and say, can they do what they are flying? It's a 2-step process, meaning you go to the investors and say, we can find a good target company for you, but you have to give me money first. So you go and raise it, and then you bring a company which is what you have kind of area, what you have said, and the way that is called business combination. And once the business combination happens, then that company becomes that takes over the public listing. That is the SPAC process. So we went and convinced the public. In fact, we went for 200 million, and I was so surprised. We had almost $1 billion on the table.
Wow.
It is yes. I didn't expect, or I mean, there was such a good reception for us.
That's wonderful.
But then our bankers told, do you want to uprise that you can go and say, okay, instead of 200, I can 300 or 400. Then we thought about it, and I kind of said, I didn't want to do that. I said, we'll just go with it. And of course, then there is what is called an over allotment, which is 15%. So that's why it became 200, became 230 million. So we completed the IPO, and we started talking to target companies, and we are progressing very well. Because of confidentiality,
Sure.
I cannot talk about any of those, but hopefully we'll have a combination completed and we will be successful and take it forward. I just want to give you that. That's kind of
that's again fascinating. And what we were talking about prior to going live on the show is because of the show and because of a lot of the conversations I have now, I have people coming to me and saying, hey, can you match me with, so who is an ideal company for somebody like Innovative for what you're doing? I mean, what size, or is there a particular industry, or what are you looking for in something like that?
Excellent. We are looking at technology companies. I mean, the industry is kind of broad, but digital technology, or including healthcare technology, anything uses technology to improve and grow. That's because that's my background, my knowledge. So I can kind of leverage it and improve on it. For example, in a cloud space, SaaS space, anything which increases performance, and it can grow very much.
Any particular price range or valuation?
Valuation is generally, because of the current thinking, somewhere between 1.5 to $2.5 billion. That's the valuation we are looking for. I mean, it doesn't matter, it could go a little higher, but in that range, meaning it's not just a startup with trying to raise, 20 million, 30 million. We are looking at the companies which we can raise 300, 400, or 500 million capital. So even though we only have 230 in our bank account, but there is what is called PIPE. PIPE stands for Private Investment and Private Equity. Or I mean, public equity, private investment, public equity. So that people will invest if they know, that is after knowing which company. That money comes only, they know, okay, this is the company we are bringing in. So that would create additional investment. So we are looking like 400 to 500 million kind of number there. But the total market value will be 2 billion, in that range. That's the company we are currently pursuing.
Fascinating. And I know you'll find this hard to believe. I actually have one for you. I mean, very seriously, but we'll talk about that another time. We'll talk about that.
I mean, anybody who is interested, I mean, we would really welcome to talk to them. If not us, we can, because this is still a community. Everybody knows each other, and we would be. I mean, in fact, I've been invited to give talks on SPAC now. So I give generally how encourage. I mean, we, of course, in our case, we are not limited to companies in the US, because we formed our SPAC in Cayman Islands in such that we can bring company anywhere from the world. So we have a much broader opportunity. So we are really looking at international companies as well.
Awesome. Well, we'll talk offline on that. So let's get into the book, Autobiography of an Immigrant. What was the motivation? What was the why behind writing the book?
That's a very good question. By the way, I just want to show you, this is the book, and it is available on Amazon. Okay, the thought process. I'm not actually a real storyteller or writer. I do tell stories to my grandchildren, but it's all make believe, very, but I know how to keep them more inquisitive. They want to know. So there is always, before finishing, I keep some suspense so that the next day we can continue chapter 2, and they are interested what's going to happen. So that much I know, but I have never written anything like a story at all. I have written quite a bit in scientific journals, and I've given talks to various scientific groups. I mean, things of that type. So I have a writing. I mean, I also have a PhD thesis, which I wrote. So I can write technology or technical stuff, but not really from a story. So this is a very, very first experience of writing a book as my own story. So the real reason, in fact, there are 3 reasons for starting that book project. One, I thought I want to kind of, because I came from far away, I mean, from India, and even though my children and grandchildren, they're all born, and we kind of have a social, and we visit India and all, they still don't know a lot about me or my background, my roots. So I thought I want to bring that back as some kind of historical thing for them in the event they read sometime later. So it is more of a historical perspective of transferring information from me to my children and grandchildren, and then legacies thereafter. But that is the number one objective.
Sure.
In fact, my granddaughter wrote the foreword for my book. By the way,
that's
my
awesome.
granddaughter is currently studying law at Oxford in London. So, she's she's young, 19, but she's very, very excellent student. And, so I just want to, and she kind of understood what the purpose was. The 2 other reasons are, I think my experience and my adventures or my hurdles, my, facing, or even successes, it doesn't matter. The whole thing would be a good possibility for young people uh, in America. I mean,
Yes.
not just immigrants, anybody,
Yes.
because there are a lot of interesting things I went through, and I have, I mean, actual stories to support. So it'll be a good to either what to do or what not to do.
Yeah.
Both ways.
There's
So that is
probably a
the
few lessons in there.
exactly second purpose. Third is really for a specific class. If anybody who is planning to start a business, whether it's small business, mid-size, or large business, I think my the background in the sense what I have done would be more like a recipe, a cookbook to follow to some extent or not to do. Say again. So I think it would be so. Those are the three main objectives. I think I have accomplished that in the book. Those are the three
The-
things I've done.
Well, I mean, that's fantastic. And I agree with you. Obviously, when you have the level of success that you've had, again, we were talking a little bit prior to going on air here. It's phenomenal. And you have a true, I say it this way, an American success story, right?
Real
Of
American dream, really.
the
That is a
American
true
dream
statement.
story, right? Which unfortunately, number one, isn't being shared enough these days, in my opinion. So thank you for that. But also, then, like you say, the recipe of, and we already talked about it quickly, you had to make a decision when you were trying to sell something that nobody had ever sold before. Do I believe in me or not? And
Correct.
and that
That
one
is one
that
lesson.
one lesson.
Just one thing I want to, I believe you are the person who will know more about you than anybody else. So if you are not confident, then it's bad news. You have to have the strength of the confidence, and you should believe in yourself. And then if you believe in you, you can go and get it done.
Well,
It's my experience.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the nature. I just prior to this, I was doing a training with an organization, and we were sharing that it's about fear only takes place when you leave the present and you stepped into an imagined future. In other words, you can't be fearful until you leave today and go someplace and then create something in your mind that could possibly go wrong. And so when you had to make a decision, do I believe in me with stamps.com or not? Well, you believed in your education and expertise and all that. And that was the first lesson. So then the next became obviously you had to take that action, right?
Exactly. You need to have a vision or a destination. Then you have to develop the navigation to that destination in your own mind. And there will be hurdles, there will be challenges, but you should have the confidence, I will overcome and move with that. Then you will reach that destination or close to that.
Well, what just came to me is, of course, you had that. You created the GPS system.
Exactly. that in fact, this I want to tell you. This was about in 1984 or 85. Some newspaper, some of the Indian local publication interviewed me about GPS and interplanetary travel and all, because I've been in the space area. So they asked me, so what do you think the future would be? So I made a comment at the time, before this iPhone was around. I told them everybody will have GPS in their hand. That was, in fact, it's quoted in one of the articles. But that, of course, this is how many years ago? Almost 40 years ago. I made that before the even. Not only iPhone. I don't think any kind of a handheld telephone system was there. So, but I knew that is going to happen because the trend is there. So just to give that GPS. So now you cannot find anybody without GPS.
Yeah, and again, from a training standpoint and from a metaphor standpoint of GPS will get you exactly where you want to go as long as you do one thing. Tell it where you want to go.
Exactly. You need to have a destination.
You've got to have a destination. So I love the idea of your desire as an immigrant to want to share lessons for all of us, because no matter who you are or what you do, there are more lessons in business, but more lessons in life. So two very valuable lessons already, that you've got to take action, that you've got to make that decision going forward. How, and also memorializing all these wonderful things that you've accomplished. I think it's fascinating. What other key points or things can people pull from the book that could make a difference in their lives?
Yes. One thing, in my experience, there is many people are afraid to make decisions. They want somebody else to make the decision. They walk away from because decision making is ownership, because you don't know
Great point.
what will happen. My advice, you have to take the decision. If you're a leader or if you're any individual, you have to make the decision, but you have to make the decision right as you feel, based on the best information you have. You not walk away from it and wait somebody else to do. You have to do it, but sometimes you make wrong decisions. That is a natural, but hopefully that wrong decision teaches you to make the right decisions subsequently. But avoiding or postponing making decision is not good.
Again, the training I was just doing, we talked about decision making and coming from the root, the Latin root decidere, to cut off. You have to cut off any other choice and be committed to that choice. And I don't know this to be true or not, but again, just there's not a GPS that would take you two places at the same time, is there?
I mean, you can take two, not at the same time, maybe sometime different.
In sequence. Yes, you could do it in sequence, but even in sequence, right? If I wanted to go to two locations and I wanted to go to a midpoint, it would take me to the midpoint first,
Correct.
And then from the midpoint to the final destination, correct?
Exactly.
So again, in essence, I would have to make a decision. I would have to decide the midpoint to then get, if I wanted to make that stop along the way. That's what I was trying to think of just quickly, the analogy, but again, I love that. Another great lesson. How about one more great lesson from the book?
Okay, I think that the real great lesson in my mind, you should always work with people of integrity.
Beautiful.
Your team, it is not you. You may be you don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. So you have to pull a team together, whoever that is. The key, it is not their educational background, those are kind of essential things. But the most valuable thing, integrity and honesty. And if you think that person has certain problems with those, you should cut it off right from the beginning. Not wait until, maybe he will improve, he will change. They don't change. So that is something, of course, it's subjective. You don't know when you meet a person or talk to them. It takes some time to really understand, but you get a certain clues. So that is something you have to have. But when you recognize something wrong, cut the relationship immediately. So I don't know whether I'm saying it. This is just my feeling. The team is going to be successful, not just you alone. So in order to have the success, you need to have the right team. Means in order to have the right team, you need to have every ingredient properly put together.
Again, you mentioned recipe earlier, and a good chocolate cake is really good, but if there's no chocolate in the recipe, that doesn't do any good.
Exactly. Exactly.
It doesn't become that, right?
Yeah.
So again, wonderful. I love the simplicity of the lessons combined with the grand nature of the results. I mean,
One thing I always say, you always think big, meaning, sometimes, of course you don't, I want to fly by myself with my hands. That's not, I mean, realistically, but you have to think big, meaning if you're going to make an impact on society to change the lives of many people, think big. And it may not get everything, but you may make a small impact.
yeah, great advice. Absolutely wonderful. Uh, I was going to ask you for one last word of wisdom for everybody. You got one more in you?
Yeah, I mean, there is always something you can talk about, but let me, I didn't, this is not a prepared kind of thought. It's just
Sure.
off the cuff. I think what one should do, one should not be afraid of meeting challenges. That means even if there is a, for example, I have a story in my book. When I finished my uh, college, I mean, I had to, immediately register for selective service, and I was classified because of after the postgraduate schooling doesn't give you a student deferment. So there is no student deferment. So I got into 1A. 1A is, I don't know whether you know the
Yeah.
classification. 1A means you are ready to be, you have to
Drafted.
report. And so I went through, this is during the Vietnam War. So I went through I actually took an exam, written exam, and there is a physical exam. Physical exam, if you can stand up, you pass. But if written exam will take you to the right place. So I'm good in taking exam. So I mean, I did fairly well. So they thought I'm very valuable. So I was posted in the intelligence group, meaning beyond the enemy lines. I mean, really,
Yeah.
that is the most dangerous part. But anyway, so I said, okay, if I have to go to Vietnam, that's one way to see Vietnam. So I was ready to, in fact, I had a 3 days or 4 days before I was supposed to report to the training. I got this card because I was also working at that time for NORAD, the North American Defense Command. And so actually the general, 3-star general, wrote a letter saying that we need you here, so you get an occupational deferment. I mean, it was a surprise. I mean, I did get it, so I didn't go to Vietnam. So what I'm trying to say is, you should not be afraid. See, I was not afraid to go to Vietnam, even though I know may not come back. But that's what, you have a duty. You're an American. You're working for the country and you represent, and you have to do. So, I mean, that is a just event. But anytime when you take certain path, the fear should not be, I mean, you can use the fear to find a solution, being creative, but the fear should not deter from not doing it. I don't know whether that's a good lesson, but
It,
that's my experience.
that's a fabulous lesson, and it's a great lesson to wrap up on here. Like I said, I knew we were going to have to do more than one show on this, but this has been fabulous. Mohan, just thank you so much for being here. I love your joy.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
love
Yeah, that's
your,
another. Most people tell me, I mean, I'm an optimist. There are two classes of people, half full, half empty. I'm a half full guy,
yep.
meaning I see goodness in everything. I mean, you try, that is a positive, because not if you're positive, you give the vibration to somebody else, they become positive. But if you're very negative, suspect everything, anybody who meets with you, they will become the same thing. So I would recommend to be positive. That's
That's
another
awesome.
lesson.
And you definitely have that. That's why I want to do another show. See, you already
Okay.
got me. So
Thanks a lot.
thank you for joining us here today. Greatly
Thank you
appreciate
very,
it.
very much.
And thank you all for joining us here at Scott Schilling Speaks. We'll see you again at the next event. Have a fabulous day.
Thanks.